Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Most Merciful. To all of our viewers out there, we begin by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're glad that you're joining us again one more time at the intersection of faith and reason, where our guest is Dr. Jafar Sheikh Idris. Dr. Jafar, it's good to be with you again. Last time we were talking about the need, not the need, but the possibility that arguing for the existence of God rationally is easy, even though it's very ironic that it's the believers that have to argue for this. And you mentioned that that should not be the case, and I believe that we will be addressing this later on. And then you also spoke about some of the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah, a great Islamic thinker and philosopher in this regard. And you were talking about the kind of people that might potentially deny the existence of God. Yes. Yeah. And I believe that we were given three options by Ibn Taymiyyah. His very first honest and blunt opinion about them, that they were liars.
Some of them.
And yes, and the second were suffering from sophistry.
Yes.
That's a new word that I learned last time. I'll make sure to use it every time from now on. And then there was the third kind of people that were very interesting. And these are people that were just not aware.
Aware of,
Yes.
And we're enumerating the questions that he raised regarding the fact that this knowledge of the Creator is innate. The first question was about what kind of knowledge is that. The second question was about why, if that is the case, people deny it. The third question is, if this is something that is in the human nature, then what is the use of arguments, he said.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you don't try to convince someone of something which he already believes in. And his reply is that this strengthens the faith, even of those who
believe.
And we can elaborate on this and remind ourselves of the fact that faith is not something that you have once and for all. It is something that a person can lose. It is something that can be strengthened or weakened. And he says that it's a fact that if you know something, then the more you have evidence for it, the stronger your faith in it will be.
Sure.
So he says that the arguments and the evidence strengthen the faith of those who are already believers. And I would add something else, that it shows also the irrationality of or untenability of the position of the atheist. I don't condemn the atheist only, but I will tell him that you are being irrational. There is evidence for the existence of the Creator, and you are denying it. And all your arguments for the non-existence of the Creator are invalid arguments. So, and Ibn Taymiyyah says somewhere else that this is something that is a duty on Muslims to do. That you must make the non-believer feel that he is defeated. If you don't do this, you will not be giving your religion its due. Of course, not everyone can do that.
Sure, and obviously I think he's talking about intellectually defeated.
Yeah, of course. Of course. We're talking about intellectual.
Yeah, that's interesting that somebody from back then at Ibn Taymiyyah's time is actually promoting and encouraging such a thing. And it seems like all believers, and I'm saying that all believers meaning that of all different faith groups, is that we really feel very apologetic nowadays.
Yes, but this is because, he would say, I think, because their knowledge of religion is meager, and because their faith itself is weaker. So the stronger the faith, as we said last time, the stronger your faith is, the more rational you become. The stronger the faith, and the more knowledgeable you are, the more rational you become. And he says that he benefited greatly, and I can testify to this from my own experience. He says that he benefited greatly from knowing the position of the non-believers and the deviant people. And he made a general rule that the more you know about the falsehood of anything that contradicts religion, the stronger your faith will be. So, and I can say this also from my experience. Sometimes, I purposely read a book on atheism also. Of course, I don't encourage everyone to do that, especially if they are young or so. But I benefit, I benefit greatly from this. Inshallah, we'll give some examples of these. Now, he says that the fundamental thing is what we have said. And this is the reason, in fact, why people believe. They don't believe because of the arguments that we are going to mention now, because some people are not even aware of these arguments. They do not even understand them sometimes. And sometimes the arguments can be put in a wrong form. Some atheists in the West criticized, I think one of them was Kant. They criticized argument for the existence of God. No, it is not Kant, no, because Kant was a believer. Marx. They criticized argument for the existence of God. They thought that they proved them to be false. Therefore, there is no God. Now, a very famous British philosopher said, no, this doesn't follow. He was not a believer himself, but he was speaking just logically. He said that the arguments can be false, but still God exists.
Sure.
Because you can give a false argument for the existence of something which in fact exists, but not for the arguments or the evidence that you mentioned. So we want to emphasize this fact. We are not saying this. We are not claiming that any person who doesn't understand these kinds of arguments in the elaborate way which we might resort to is not a believer. The belief is based primarily on that on that innate
nature that is in humanity. So that's a good point that you're making there, and that is the defeat of an argument does not necessarily mean that it is the defeat of what that argument stands for.
No, yes, of the conclusion.
Of the conclusion
yes,
of that argument.
Yes, because a person can make wrong premises and arrives at a true conclusion.
Sure.
Yes. So the fact that his argument is false doesn't mean that the conclusion is false.
Right. I got you.
Now, he says that he says that some people, and I know this also from my study of Western philosophy, people confine evidence for the existence of the Creator to certain arguments. They call them arguments for the existence of the Creator, and they teach them to the students and so on. And he says that this is wrong. He says that there are innumerable
arguments.
There is innumerable kinds of evidence, not arguments in the logical sense, evidence for the existence of the Creator. And he said because this is something that is very important for people, so the God who created them helps them by giving them so many pieces of evidence for it. And he mentions among these, first, of course, human nature, then what he calls the ayahs. He said that the argument of the ayah, I will elaborate on this, you know that this is mentioned in the Quran several times. An ayah is a sign, and is an evidence.
An ayah is an Arabic word.
An ayah
it's
is
an Arabic word,
sign
which means
sign.
a sign.
Sign. And then there is what is called the cosmological argument. This is very well known to people in the West. And then there is what is called the argument from design, that the world is made in such a way that
It must have a designer.
Yeah, it is designed. It is not just God. The world is not made of just isolated, created things. There is a design. Then there is, he says, argument from the words of the Creator. You read the Quran, or you read the Torah, the original Torah, or you read the Gospel that was revealed to Jesus. And by reading the words of the Creator, you come to believe in the Creator, even if you were not a believer before. He says also the lives of the prophets. Someone might not be, might be an atheist, but then he meets a prophet, he sees, he becomes very impressed by his life, he becomes a Muslim, and so on. So he says that there are many kinds of arguments.
The people who limited these arguments, I am thinking that they did not say these are all the arguments that are out there, but what they're saying is that I think they would be in reaction to the arguments that were raised by the people who denied the existence of God. That's how they were.
They don't say, they don't express this, but the implicit assumption is that these are the arguments.
These are the only arguments that are out there.
And therefore, if we prove them to be false, then
we are done.
Yes, then there is no Creator.
But as you said, we tend to be a bit meager and maybe at times a bit shallow and trivial in the process when we are counter-arguing these points.
Some of them. But you remember, some of these atheists, some of them were great thinkers. So you don't expect any ordinary Muslim to have an argument against them. That doesn't mean that their arguments will shake his belief, but he is not. He doesn't have the knowledge also to counter their arguments. So I'm not saying that every Muslim should be so. But this is a kind of jihad, as this jihad has become a dangerous word these days. But anyway, this is a peaceful jihad, so there is no problem.
Sheikh, when we come back, I would like to ask if that has actually promoted atheism, the lack of answers to the arguments that are made. Did that promote atheism in any way, shape, or manner? And please do stay tuned, and we will be back with Dr. Sheikh Jafar again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back again to the intersection of faith and reason. If you're just joining us, our guest is Dr. Jafar Sheikh Idris, and we are generally speaking about the relationship between faith and reason, and particularly at this point we're talking about the evidence for the rational evidence for the existence of God. And Sheikh, I believe you mentioned them in summary.
Yes.
And I believe we're going to talk about each one of them at this point.
We said the first evidence is the innate knowledge.
We did say that, but I'm sorry, I think I did ask, does the lack of response from the community of the believers to the arguments of those who denied the existence of God, did that promote?
To be fair to religious theologians, even in the West, they do write books against atheists. Whether the atheists are convinced or not is something they are not to be blamed for. In fact, one of the staunchest atheists declared that he now became a believer. Yes, he's called Professor Flew. And he used to criticize these arguments for the existence of God and so on. But there will always be people like this, as if they are suffering from sophistry or they are not aware or they are liars. So what can you do?
But at least the
But
arguments are there.
What?
But
yes,
at least...
yes. This is what we should make them feel, that they are wrong. Sure. Whether they admit it or not.
Or at least on the defensive, rather than the believers are on the defensive at this point. Okay. I'm sorry, Sheikh.
Now, the second evidence is a very important one, is that the evidence of what the Quran and the Sunnah call ayahs. Ayahs. An ayah, as we said, is a sign. He said something interesting. He says, this is Ibn Taymiyyah, he says that a sign is not an argument. It is something that points to something else. For example, I know you, I know your voice. So if I hear your voice, I say, Yasir must be around. So your voice
is an ayah,
is a sign for your existence.
Sure.
So it is not an argument. It is not an argument. It points. And he says that the advantage of the ayah over the arguments, as that we will inshallah elaborate on, is that the ayah points to God directly. But while the argument gives you a general conclusion that there must be a creator or an eternal thing. But the ayah, as if you can say, makes a link between you and your creator.
That's a very, very interesting point that he makes.
Now, but then he raises the question. Someone might say, or I don't know, perhaps I raise the question. Someone might say, but this is not an evidence. This means that I already know God. And I know this is His creation. And to see something as a sign of something else, you must know both.
Sure.
And you must see the link between the two. So the question would be, then what is the use? Yes, I think he raised this question. Well, then what is the use? I already know God.
I'm not sure which is impressive more. The fact that he makes the argument or the questions that he asks for his own argument.
Because he's a great intellect. He's not afraid of raising questions.
About his own argument.
Yes. So he said, there's a good reason for this. The first, as we said about the evidence generally, he said that this strengthens your faith. The more you see of God's signs, the stronger your faith in Him will be.
Sure. And
the more you know about Him, because in the Quran there are many verses about that invite us to think about the heaven and the earth and so on. And he said that this tells you about the attributes of your Creator.
Sure.
So there is a reason for this.
And he's saying that I don't want to jump into conclusions, but it sounds as if he's saying that the ayahs do serve more of a purpose to the one who already believes.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Rather than the one who does not.
What about someone who doesn't believe? He says that you help him to see the link between the two. There must if he thinks deeply about the nature of the creation, and he already, even if he doesn't believe in God, he must have an idea of God. As some people said, you can't deny something of which you have no idea. So even an atheist must have an idea of what he is
denying.
What he is denying. Now, if he has that idea, and then you tell him about the nature of the creation, to help him to see the connection between the creation and
what he's denying,
which
is
he's
God.
denying, and then he will accept it. Because many of the atheists say that we don't see them as ayahs, we see them as just brute facts. this is a tree, that is the sea, these are clouds, and so on. He says that the argument helps the person to see the link between the two. And the best argument that does this is an argument in the Quran, which I will, with your permission, elaborate
Please.
on. The Quran says, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ, were they created out of nothing? أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ, or were they the creators of themselves? This means that the Quran is not assuming the non-existence of the Creator, as some of the arguments do. It is assuming that there is a Creator. And it tells the person who denies the existence of the Creator, then what is the alternative? If there is no Creator, then how did you come to be?
And that will be the first part of the verse. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ.
Yes. Where did you come from? And whenever the Quran asks a rhetorical question, this means that the answer is well known to a rational person. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ, did you come from nothing? Any rational person with a little reflection would say,
no.
Well, nothing comes from nothing. No. أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ, are you the creators of yourself? Again, with a little reflection, one can see that a thing doesn't create itself.
Sure.
Because to create, it must be there.
Sure.
But if it is there, it is already created. So to say that something creates itself is a contradiction in terms.
Sure.
You assume the thing to exist, and you assume it not to exist at the same time. And any rational person, whether a layman or someone with big intellect, can see that this cannot be the case. So this is the Quranic argument for against atheists. This is one of the arguments, and it is a very famous one. Many of our theologians elaborated on it, and it is better than the arguments that we will mention inshallah about what is called the cosmology.
Sheikh,
yes.
Please, I'm sorry, but there is no third alternative mentioned in the verse.
Because there is no third alternative. The third alternative is that it must be created by that is assumed.
And that is left unsaid.
Yeah, but it's assumed. It is. This is what you said at first. You said that we should not be on the defensive.
Gotcha.
Now here the Quran is not on the defensive. It says there is a creator. If you deny the creator, then show me.
You either created yourself,
which is impossible,
or you came from nothing,
which is impossible.
And we won't even mention the third alternative because it is well known.
It is well known.
Nice.
So this is the Quran. For some time, I thought that this was like the cosmological argument that starts by assuming that there is no creator and then proving the existence of the creator. But then I discovered that I was mistaken. In fact, the assumption is that there is a creator.
Let's prove otherwise.
Yes. So
nice.
The onus of proof is on you who deny the existence of the creator.
And that's what the Quran is promoting at this point.
And I tell you something interesting. Inshallah, I will give some evidence for this if we continue this discussion. I looked into the arguments of the atheists, contemporary arguments, and I found that most of them had to resort to one of these two.
One of these two alternatives.
Now, or both of them sometimes. Even some great scientists had to say, because they insisted on atheism, had to say that things come from nothing, or had to say that they create themselves. There was a third alternative for the atheists, but now it is no longer there. They used to say that the world is eternal. So it doesn't need to be created. Now, after the Big Bang theory, it is only a theory, but anyway, it closed that
alternative there.
Yes, because according to the Big Bang theory, everything had a beginning: time, space, matter, and so on. So no one can say that the world is eternal. And even before the Big Bang theory, it was wrong to say this, because you cannot point to anything in this world and say that it is eternal. The Greeks used to think that the heavenly bodies are eternal, because they said that they never saw any change in the sun or the moon, or so they must be eternal. And Al-Ghazali replied to them. He said, how do you know? These are huge bodies. This is what Al-Ghazali said. And they are very far away from us. So if they diminish, you will not see the amount of
diminishing part of them.
But now we know that the sun is continuously
diminishing.
Now, and the same applies to the moon. So no one can now point to something and say that this is eternal, because everything that exists that you point to
must have had
can be changed. And if it can be changed, then it cannot be eternal.
And with this, we would come to the end of this episode, hoping that you would join us next time with our dear guest here, Dr. Jafar Sheikh Idris. Until that, we say so long. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.